can't tell you exactly when it happened, but at some nebulous point when I was a teenager, I stopped caring about Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't think it's right to say I stopped being a fan. Sonic had been the most integral part of my formative experiences with my favorite hobby. He was my favorite character, not just in gaming, but in anything. The Sonic I grew up with was a phenomenon that turned the entire industry on its head, that garnered praise and respect and adoration from gamers of all ages, that made Sega a household name and left a cavalcade of imitators in his wake. The Sonic of my teen years was increasingly regarded as a washed-up has-been, a laughingstock, and a cautionary tale. And I'm not just talking about the well-worn, rocky transition to 3D talking point that GameSpot.com was going on about more than 20 years ago, although that was a part of it. But there was more to it than that. I felt at that time that Sonic, the brand, the aesthetic, the character, had cast away everything that made it so compelling in the first place. And with each new game, it was like they just doubled down on that unsuitable new direction even further. I'd always be a Sonic fan, but Sonic had stopped doing any of the things that had made me a fan, so eventually I stopped caring. Maybe I just needed to accept that mascot platformers weren't what they used to be, and that Sega had no reason or ability to position this series as a system seller anymore. That dream had died a long time ago. So maybe Sonic changing his image and refocusing on kids was what Sega needed to do for it to survive and thrive. Maybe I'd just outgrown it. Maybe it had outgrown me. This is not an unusual phenomenon. It's kind of one of the constants of the internet. As long as a kid-friendly property has been going for long enough, you will see the periphery demographic raging about how it used to be good. The difference is, and maybe this is true of the silent majority, but I wasn't raging. I can dig up message board posts from this time of fans tearing into Sonic Heroes or being in denial about Shadow the Hedgehog, but I can't show you my own words from this time, because I just wasn't participating. I wasn't even paying much attention. The Sonic series as I'd known it was gone, and I figured there was no reason to expect that to change. Like, this is one of the only examples I can find from this period where I even mention the series, and that pretty much sums it up. I'd always loved the games I'd grown up with, of course, but a piece of Sonic's soul died with the Dreamcast, and it would never mean to me what it used to. I accepted this. It was okay. And then one day, a childhood friend of mine who had become my friend on the basis of us both being utterly obsessed with Sonic sat me down, put a Nintendo DS in my hand, and practically forced me to play Sonic Rush. I didn't have a DS, and I didn't have a lot of interest in getting one, but my buddy was insistent that I give it a try, so begrudgingly, I did. My cynical perspective on the series preceded me. "Oh look," I said, "even on a handheld, Sonic has to be a 3D model now. There goes the most charming thing about the Advance games." The level was just an uninspired rip-off of Green Hill, the music was totally unsuited for the series, and the layout so far was just your usual hold right to win garbage with speed boosters everywhere. I didn't know why he'd made me play this, but hey, my confirmation bias was right, surprise surprise! Yet another modern Sonic game takes the L. I'd been playing for 30 seconds and I'd already decided how I felt about it. And then my friend, who was peering eagerly over my shoulder, gave me a bit of advice. I'll never forget what he said, or the extremely strange way he phrased it. He told me, and I quote, "Come on, man, hold down Y and put some boost on it!" All of a sudden, I cared about Sonic again, and I would never stop. The moment I hit that button, the screen quaked, and true to his name, Sonic broke the sound barrier and streaked off like a ballistic missile. This was our introduction to the boost, a mechanic that makes Sonic's signature superpower the absolute undeniable centerpiece of the game's design. Boosting not only pushes your speed to the absolute max at the touch of a button, it also allows Sonic to break through obstacles and tear through enemies without breaking stride. But when I look back on Sonic Rush now, the boost actually isn't the first thing that comes to mind. What hits my synapses first is the style. As much as the adventure games did to redefine this Sonic as a stoked, baller, more poppin' Y2K dude than the original, even they pale in comparison to this. If Sonic Rush was a person, it would be Fred Durst. I don't know, in the year 2000, I unironically believed that Fred Durst was the coolest person who had ever lived. The slow-mo silhouettes on the title cards, the vibrant and varied zones, the deliciously low-poly character models and animations. Sonic's edge, his aura, his style is unmistakable. And perhaps just as importantly, it is not like what came before. When I think of modern Sonic as a concept, what sets him apart from the original, what gives him unique value, this is the game I think of, where this Sonic stood confidently with his chest out and turned to snark at you if you didn't get in gear. This one isn't so quick-tempered. He adopts a loose stance in constant motion, ready to blast off at the touch of a button. Where this Sonic catapulted around surreal stylized worlds, this one is a little more grounded in his setting, but no less vibrant. And where this Sonic set the tone with music inspired by 90s era electropop, this one, well, Sonic Rush regrettably stands as the only game in the series ever composed by the iconic Hideki Naganuma, best known for his work on what is probably the most Y2K game there could ever be, Jet Set Radio. I don't know, it's either that or Space Channel 5. Maybe it's a testament to how much pure there was inherent in Jet Set Radio, but it's always blown me away just how unexpectedly well Naganuma's style fits this series. This soundtrack is the glue that holds the game's entire presentation together. Sonic Rush simply would not be Sonic Rush without it. And if you want to be as trendy in the 20s as Sonic Rush was in the 2000s, look no further than this episode's sponsor, Chimera. The age of giant suits, giant jorts, and puka shell necklaces may be over, but high-quality, ethically sourced, and reasonably priced clothes can never go out of style. And I can't emphasize that word enough, quality. The designs are eye-catching, the material is soft and sturdy, and the clothes are built to last. I've been wearing this shirt for the better part of a year now, and it's still like it's brand new. Scroll down to the description for a link to Chimera, pick out something nice, and use my code GEEK to save 10% on your entire order. A thank you to everyone who does for helping to support the show. So how about that story? A mysterious force is merging Sonic's dimension with another world, breaking down the barrier between realities. In the short term, this causes entities from that other world to cross over into Sonic's and makes the map screen all wonky. That effect is so cool, but there's nothing cool about it because in the long run, this dimensional merge threatens both realities. Par for the course, I think the story cutscenes and dialogue subtract more than they add. Sonic's character was pretty on point in the adventure games, but for a long time after that, it was like they kept trying to turn him into this bland preschool anime do-gooder. And Rush falls right in the middle of that period. As much of a cool edge as he has in his actions and animations, it sure ain't reflected in his dialogue. The story scenes also include these weird, arbitrary character cameos. Oh look, there's a rock on the world map. Why? Because Knuckles gets to be in the game. I mean, kind of in the game. He doesn't actually get a new model. That's not Knuckles, that's a picture of Knuckles. Unfortunately, there's no way to skip this stuff, but at least it tends to be over pretty fast. And I kinda hate that I feel that way about it, because I absolutely love the concept. I even love some of the execution. But there's no subtext hinting at the story within the stages. At no point do you cross over to the other dimension. Heck, the antagonist from the other world is literally just a recolor of Eggman. It's easy to imagine a version of this story that was communicated more through subtext and gameplay. The way Sonic 3 differentiated between Acts 1 and 2 could have been a perfect fit for this. Maybe Act 1 of Night Carnival, and where'd they come up with that one, happens in Sonic's universe, but for Act 2 he crosses over into the same place in the other dimension, and we see those neon lights through a different lens. As it is, it feels suspiciously like they came up with the game and the levels and the bosses first, and then kinda tried to shoehorn the story around it. Which is fine, I'm probably complaining more than it really warrants. This was a low-cost game on a brand new handheld that was struggling to find its footing. I get it, the story isn't really the point of a game like this, and what's here is alright. It's just not really here for me. It's here for the kids that make up Sonic's actual target demographic. I'm sure if I'd still been a kid in the mid-2000s, it would have been engaging enough, especially because I can't even remotely deny the best thing it gave to this series. While Eggman Nega was just a recolor, he wasn't the only one to cross the barrier when the dimensions began to merge. Sonic Rush introduces the heroine of the other world, the guardian of the Soul Emeralds, Blaze the Cat. Let's sum it up like this. Blaze is the one Sonic character that everyone seems to like. Classic fans and modern fans. 2000s apologists and 2010s apologists. IDW readers and Sad AM believers. I don't think I've ever encountered anyone who doesn't like her. And I've definitely never seen such universal agreement about anything in this fandom. Blaze is a contrast to Sonic, whom a lot of kids are going to think is even cooler than he is. What with her badass moves and no-nonsense demeanor. She's Sonic's rival in temperament and ability. But by the end, through her interactions with him, she comes to see Sonic as a worthy ally, and dare I say, a friend. So she's like Shadow, but better. And Shadow was like Knuckles, but worse. And Knuckles was like Metal Sonic with a personality. And Metal was like Sonic if he was a robot, and Sonic was like Mario but fast, and Mario was like... Oh, I've lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, Blaze! She's like if classic Espio could conjure a fire tornado! She is also somehow still the only female character in the entire history of the series to get any kind of super form, and she freaking deserves one! She's awesome! And it kind of speaks to just how awesome, how well designed, and how well realized she is, that nobody cares or even notices what a blatant amalgamation she is of all these concepts that had worked before. I mean, why not? It worked for a reason, and the way it all blends together works even better. In fact, of all the endless cavalcade of characters that Sega hoisted into the series during this period, Blaze is bar none, without hyperbole, my favorite of them all, and it's not even close. Oh, and if you're wondering why Blaze just arrived in this world, and yet her face is somehow plastered in neon all over Night Carnival,
Just repeat to yourself, it's just a
game.
I should really just relax.
This is just kind of how Sonic Team operates. Kevin Eva, the Sonic brand manager in the mid to late 2000s, put it like this. The canon is always in flux, it's always malleable, because it'll always be what Sonic Team needs it to be at that exact moment. Actually, Blaze's run animation kind of reminds me of someone else who is sometimes said to be from a different point in the timeline, and at other times is from another dimension. Speaking of which, the one thing I do still have to nitpick about the game's presentation is the abandonment of pixel art. And that really was one of the best things about the latter two Advance games. I mean, 3D models make sense for the DS, they animate well, they're fine. Even if Sonic's spine length was so out of control in this period, they come down to his ankles when he looks up. Somebody needs to give that hog a haircut. But I still vastly prefer pixel art. And I kinda wonder if Rush was meant to stick with this style at some point. You wouldn't think they'd make sprite art of Blaze just for the credits. But as stylish as this game is, there's one little issue that certainly doesn't ruin the game's cool factor, but it does kind of undermine it. Sonic Rush utilizes a simple trick mechanic. Anytime you shoot off a ramp, bounce off a spring, or grind a rail, you can mash a button to combo tricks, which scores a lot of points, and more importantly, fills up your boost gauge. And if you max it out, you have unlimited boost power as long as you can keep that combo going, by doing tricks or defeating enemies. So the game encourages and incentivizes you to use this system whenever you can. It's a neat little mechanic. Not so complex that it'll break you out of the game's flow, but perfectly complementary with Rush's style.
The problem is, Sonic has to belt out a cool boy voice line every gosh darn time he does anything!
What this means is that if you're playing optimally, then Naganuma's brilliant soundtrack will constantly be accompanied by Jason Griffith screaming the same 4 voice lines over and over. But hey, putting up with the trick system and its noise is undeniably worth it. After all, it lets you do this. In an old-school Sonic game, a move like the boost would have completely undermined the point. These were platform action games first and foremost, and going fast was a matter of knowing the intricacies of the physics and level design. Jumping, rolling, multiple paths, hidden secrets, power-ups. It's become a cliche to say this, but it's repeated so often because it is so true. Sonic games are not about speed, they're about momentum. Or at least they were. And then this happened.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
It is weirdly understated these days just how different the two adventure games are from one another. Sonic Adventure essentially still is a classic Sonic game in everything but the aesthetics. SA1 might have debuted the character designs, but in so many ways, Sonic Adventure 2 was the first modern Sonic game. If classic Sonic is a momentum platformer, modern Sonic is a spectacle platformer. A platformer cast through the prism of a high-octane racing game, blending Sega's arcade legacy with their most famous series. Classic Sonic can be approached in different ways. You can blast through as fast as you can, or you can slow down, take your time, experiment with the physics, and look for secrets. At the end of the act, you're commended just for getting through, because there's no right way to get through. But modern Sonic doesn't have hidden secrets, it has hidden shortcuts. It gives you a rank based on how you got through, whether it's good, great, jammin', awesome, extreme! Going fast is easy, it's what you do with that speed that matters. What Adventure 2 did for 3D Sonic, Rush does for 2D Sonic. It de-emphasizes every element of Sonic's design that's not conducive to this goal. Sonic Rush wasn't the team's first attempt at bringing this speed-first focus into the second dimension, but it was the first time they stuck the landing, and the boost is what made the difference. These titles are often attributed solely to DIMPS, a development house founded from the ashes of SNK, along with a few castaways from Capcom. DIMPS, like many devs before them, was hired by Sega to produce spin-off Sonic titles, mostly on handhelds. But while it is true that DIMPS staff made up the bulk of the development team, it was actually Sonic Team's own Akinori Nishiyama that sat in the director's chair for all 3 advanced titles. So it wasn't a surprise when he was brought back in to direct Sonic's debut game on the Nintendo DS. And I have to imagine the team learned some lessons from Sonic Advance 2. In a typical platformer, enemy placement and variety matter a lot, but in a spectacle platformer, enemies are more a means to an end. You can move so fast that they don't pose a threat. But if you insist that they do, yeah, that's what happens. That's the problem Advance 2 ran into. Over and over and over again. If you're gonna try to make the player feel like Sonic, they're gonna need to have reaction times to match. And nobody does, especially on a 3-inch screen. That's why boosting is also an offensive maneuver. It kinda lets Sonic have his chili dog and eat it too. It keeps the core verb of the game design, run, from becoming a liability. Instead of designing levels full of automation, which is what Advance 2 did, and what the 3D series had increasingly leaned into, why not give that control back to the player? Player agency is the whole point of video games. There's a huge difference in being able to do something in a game versus having something forced upon you. It's also probably worth noting that there was a precedent for this. Dig around on 1990s Usenet, or just ask a certain lurker, and you'll find someone arguing that the true moment where Sonic lost his way and started spiraling was, and I am not kidding, this. I've heard it claimed that the spin dash undermined the entire point of Sonic's game design. And to a certain extent, this increased emphasis on speed and execution was just the evolutionary trend line underlying the entire series. SA2 was just the point where we crossed the threshold and the balance shifted. In a sense, the boost was to the 2000s what the spin dash was to the 90s. Accordingly, it would superannuate it completely. You can still technically roll and spin dash in Rush, but why would you? It feels absolutely vestigial at this point. But while the boost might have solved some of this speed-first style's roughness, it certainly couldn't solve all of it. Like I said, it all comes with pros and cons, and for as many issues as the boost solves, it also raises some new ones. You can practically feel the level designers scrambling to reason their way around it. The game emphasizes boosting all the time, but it runs into issues when it needs to get you to stop. 9 times out of 10, blasting off from a standstill won't get you in trouble. But what if this is that one other time? Rush's levels don't generally do a good enough job at warning you about this. And when you've maxed out the boost gauge and have infinite energy and you're really feeling it, you're even more inclined to keep that combo going. Unfortunately, the advanced game's proclivity for platforming over bottomless pits has not gone anywhere. Intentionally or otherwise, I'd say Rush sets at the far end of the difficulty curve when it comes to this series. The skill ceiling is sky high and it's made out of broken glass. I remember pushing through a lot of trial and error back in the mid-2000s. Let's be honest, most Sonic games have weird, janky bits you need to learn your way around, but it's always a lot worse when they have death traps instead. But where this put me off of Advance 2, I came to see it more as a feature in Rush, and the only real difference I can think of is that the boost was both more forgiving and so much more fun. Honestly, it says something about how much muscle memory I built up back then that it came back to me so easily, even though I hadn't played it in well over a decade. It's like I have a sixth sense for Sonic's BS. Sometimes. This is the part where I would say that aside from the boost, Sonic's core movement mechanics are a little clunky and awkward. but I've seen too many people try and pick up one of the 16-bit games and say the exact same thing. I've become all too aware of the fact that Sonic's basic movement was never not at least a little awkward compared to the more direct input of your Marios or Mega Mans. I just played them so much that it feels like second nature to me anyway. Rush, like the latter two Advance games, just features a different kind of clunky and awkward that is similarly gonna be perfectly fine once you get used to it. A game like this still probably shouldn't be doing perilous platforming over bottomless pits though. The classic games stayed away from that sort of thing, for the most part, for a very good reason. What I will nitpick though is that the rules for when Sonic's capable of offense are kind of obtuse. Like, the whole idea is that Sonic spins into a ball and can pop badniks, right? But in Rush, when you attack an enemy, you uncurl. But despite your appearance changing, your state hasn't. You can still hurt enemies, which you can't do if you get into the air without spinning any other way. It's a little inconsistent and a little bizarre, and given everything I've said about how the game is generally well designed around the boost, that makes these sections where you're locked in a room and have to defeat a set number of enemies seem absolutely antithetical to the whole idea, especially when we're also tacking on the hit points concept from Heroes. Combat just isn't Sonic's strong suit, and the only good things I can say about them is that at least they're overfast and few and far between. Mid-air actions return from the Advance games. This is one of my favorite things the 2D games of the 2000s did to set themselves apart from the classics. And in this case, they also set Sonic and Blaze apart from each other. They do a nice job giving you more options in mid-air and keeping the momentum going. And Blaze's pyrokinetic moves are just... I can't really say anything that would add to how badass she is. While the stage layouts don't change based on who you're playing as, Blaze's pyrokinesis can be used to reach heights that Sonic can't achieve. The Advance games often struggle to differentiate characters' abilities through level design, but Rush does a more effective job giving Blaze her own routes throughout the game. Maybe not a much more effective job, these divergences aren't anything too different, but I do appreciate the effort. Blaze also takes a somewhat different path through the game, and despite the lack of layout changes, just starting with Night Carnival instead of Leaf Storm kinda makes her the hard mode by default. The one move that doesn't stick the landing, literally, is the homing attack. The whole point of this move was to streamline Sonic's offense in 3D, so it's always a bit odd when it gets backported to 2D. But this is probably the worst it's ever been. It seems prone to homing in on the ground right in front of an enemy and getting you hit. You don't ever need to do it, and you won't, but it's weird that it's even here. And maybe this is just the result of trying to build a Sonic game around a new mechanic for the first time, but it seems like they had trouble differentiating each zone from the others. This is kind of another con to modern Sonic game design. Classic Sonic stages tended to feature distinct recurring features unique to each zone. Chemical plants, double helixes, collision chaos's deep vertical half-pipes, speed highways, roller coaster dive drops, red mountains, lava bowls. You can put them in silhouette, and you'd still know which zone you're looking at. But modern Sonic struggles more with this, and Rush is a good example of how. Level design across the game tends to feel awfully samey. Dashing downhill from a rolling obstacle, a horizontal U-curve leading to a ramp over a pit, a vertical drop onto a grind rail. Levels still have some nice unique gimmicks like water plants geysers or Deadline's launchers, but the actual terrain seems to hit a lot of the same beats. It's like how almost every speed stage in SA2 felt like Speed Highway. In a classic game, different zones can have different tempos. Some are more speedy and straightforward, some slow down for platforming or exploration. Some even incorporate puzzles. But if the game is going to focus this hard on it seems like it's harder to design levels with that kind of variety. Zones can also sometimes feel like they lack individual set pieces or a sense of progression, a problem the Advance trilogy also faced. You remember that tower in Stardust Speedway, that earthquake in Hilltop, that tornado in Windy Valley. But if I pull up a clip of any level in Rush, I can't really identify where I am. They just kind of keep going until they end. And especially early in the game, I find that some of the gimmicks feel weirdly disconnected from the level design and disappointingly non-interactive. The worst offender is Mirage Road's slides. You can't jump or do anything while you're on them. They seem to exist primarily to show off that we can now move Sonic closer to the camera. But all of these issues do get noticeably better toward the end of the game. Level design takes a harsh step in difficulty, yes, but it also becomes a little more memorable and unique. As for the gimmicks, Altitude Limit has these tough-as-nails rocket sections that use the DS's namesake to great effect, and the 3D hang glider is a neat little set piece. And Deadline Act 1 might just be my favorite level in the whole game. The launchers are a blast, and using these propellers to carry your momentum to a different plane looks cool and feels even better. It's like a culmination of everything you've learned at this point. The real hallmark of the level design is an increased focus on verticality, which makes sense. I'm cutting between them for the sake of clarity for most of my footage, but Rush puts both of the DS's screens through their paces, allowing you to see terrain high above or far below. All these years later, seeing Sonic dash through a loop and cross down to the lower screen is still a cool trick, and I appreciate how it's not just a cool trick. It comes with real consequences. Of course, the downside to this is that the DS titles are basically impossible to port to other hardware without pretty fundamentally overhauling them, meaning the original hardware is still the only way to officially play them. To be honest though, most of these critiques I have now didn't even occur to me back in the day. I was having too much fun. I think the reason I see them more now is because I have newer spectacle platformer style Sonic games to compare this one against. Some of the titles to come are going to strike a better balance with this stuff, including this one, or so I've heard. I never actually finished it. Do you think I should? But at the time, the concept was fresh and untested and a little rough around the edges, but I couldn't put Sonic Rush down. That said, there was something I noticed even back then. There are two areas that are practically the yin and yang of Rush's design. One of the best things about the game, and one of the worst. Let's start with the bad news.
Here we go!
With one or two exceptions, Rush's bosses are junk. And that's saying something. The boss design of the latter two advanced games already wasn't great. Perplexingly, this is the one part of the game where there is no boost, and at least gives the spin dash a chance to be useful. But for such a fundamental part of Rush's design to go unused here is really weird. The boss arenas don't just play differently, they're also rendered differently from the rest of the game. Where the levels are 3D models on 2D assets, these are full 3D arenas. At their best, this allows for some neat rotation effects. At their very best, they remind me of Nights into Dreams. But rarely are they at their best. Most of the time, they're just a little dull and repetitive. But the worst of them will have you tearing your hair out. They tend to hail from the contemporary school of boss design, where you would dodge fancy attacks until the boss graces you with its weak point, allowing you to pick off a single hit. Then the cycle gets a little tougher, rinse and repeat. This stands in stark contrast to how 2D Sonic is usually done it to this point, where a boss is almost always open to attack, and your ability to score hits is the only determining factor on how long the fight lasts. The two main exceptions to this are the Night Carnival boss, which drops enemies you can bounce on to take them out in no time if you're good enough. And Mirage Road's boss is pretty fun too. I think somebody on the dev team might have liked Quinoa, but these are unfortunately the exceptions. Nonetheless, the boss music is of course incredible, especially the pinch mode when you've almost got him. These graphics were pretty dang impressive for a handheld at the time, and I get why you'd want to show off the hardware. I don't think they'd really be all that bad if not for a few compounding issues. First, too many of them have one-hit kill moves, which is a terrible idea in fights that can go on for several minutes at a time, and really goes against Sonic's whole design ethos. As long as you have rings, you should be able to take a hit. But two, the way the rings work has changed. Now every time you get thwacked, they'll scatter further. They eventually become completely impossible to grab. And while I can see the argument that this evens up the score and makes the game more fair, given how easy it's always been to just keep picking up one ring, the way it applies to your whole stack is a problem. If I take a hit, grab a new ring, and then accidentally catch a single one of the rings that went flying, that doesn't reset the counter. If I take another hit, they'll all go flying again. But I don't think either of those issues would be all that bad if they didn't all take so many hits to beat. 8 hits is the standard for Sonic, yeah, but that was set back when you could do goofy crap like this. If you're gonna design bosses the modern way instead, you can't just keep the same system in place. In fact, I kinda suspect they knew that. The boss's health bar conspicuously stops getting bigger on the 5th bar, and if you turn the game's difficulty down to easy, they go down in 6 hits instead. Actually, as far as I can tell, the bosses are the only thing affected by the difficulty setting. Oh, and in the E3 demo, the boss of Leaf Storm goes down in 4 hits. Oh, that would have been so much better. As it is, you just kind of run into the same brick wall over and over again until finally, you get on a run where you execute everything perfectly and break through. But it doesn't really feel like you learned anything, it just feels like you got lucky. The final boss of the main campaign in particular is a nightmare, and just repeating this fight took me longer to complete than the full extent of any zone in the game. When most of your bosses take longer than both acts of the zone, you know there's a problem. So, play on easy, I guess. But if the bosses are the worst part of Rush, it's counterbalanced by an area where the march of technology has made for a clear and vast upgrade. And it all starts right here. Special stages were always a bit of a gimmick in the classics, often coming across more like a cool programming trick and an excuse for Sega to market amazing 3D graphics than something you would actually want to play for its own sake. But if they were a gimmick before, they were an absolute detriment of the Sonic Advance series, often requiring a ridiculous barrier to entry like collect all 5 special rings or hoard all 423 billion chow to even get one shot. And once you got in there, the gameplay within them was stark, bland, confusing, and sometimes impossible to see. Sonic Rush has fixed all of this, and then some. First things first, only Sonic has to worry about Chaos Emeralds at all. Blaze collects her own Dimension Soul Emeralds as well, but she just gets them as part of her story campaign. Second thing second, the method for entry has vastly improved. You've only got to worry about a single special stage per zone, and special warp gates are placed generously throughout each act. Some of them are more hidden than others, but there's always at least a few you're guaranteed to run into on a regular playthrough. So no more scouring stages for all the MacGuffins, just find one, hop on, and boost one full bar of the tension gauge for a chance at the Emerald. Even if the actual special stages still sucked, this setup would be such a vast improvement. But those special stages do not suck. They rule. The graphics rule, the movement rules, and toward the end they get absolutely teeth-gnashingly brutal, and that rules! They're based on Sonic 2's half-pipe, but back then you controlled your slippery movement with the D-pad, whereas now you do it with the stylus. And it is such a perfect fit. You'd swear the half-pipe was always meant to be played like this. This allows for split-second precision, and you're gonna need it, because like I said, yeah. It's honestly a bit of a watch whether these are my favorite special stages in the whole series, or if Sonic 3D on the Saturn is still the king. Maybe I need to play that one again. And one more time, I have to give credit to the music. I can't even tell you what a huge smile this put on my face. If you were paying attention back in 2005, Sonic Rush must have felt like finding an oasis in a desert. If you were playing this game the day it came out, you were playing it at a time when Shadow the Hedgehog came out yesterday. Imagine that. The contrast between them couldn't be clearer. At a time when Sega was in a state of turmoil, a time when Sonic was frequently a bit player in his own series, a point where Sonic Team was wildly oscillating between quote-unquote going back to Sonic's roots and utterly devaluing those roots, Sonic Rush came along to show us a better future. A Sonic who stands at the focal point. A Sonic that is completely unlike what it was in the 90s, but no less awesome for it. This was the game that taught me that Sonic being different didn't have to be a bad thing. It was a new day. It was a new start, and I had changed my ways. For the longest time, the stuff that I had nostalgia for was just the stuff that I played as a kid. But I find that's not the case anymore. I have such a vivid memory of going to the mall, buying the handheld that would be in my pocket every day for the next half-decade, popping open this exact case for the first time, and how unexpected and nice it was to feel the way it made me feel about Sonic again. It's not the same kind of nostalgic reverence I feel for the classics, but it is a nostalgic reverence all the same. Sonic Rush is so representative of such a different time in the industry, a different time in the world, a different time in my life. I see so much of who I was and what I've been through reflected in it. Like any other Sonic game, I can nitpick it to death, I can poke holes in it, but I can't deny what it means to me. I loved it back then, but it means even more to me now. At some point a long time ago, I thought I stopped caring about Sonic. I was more excited for Heroes than I had ever been for any game in my entire life, and it wasn't what I thought it would be. The way that felt wasn't as bad as teenage me experiencing his first broken heart, but there were more parallels than I'd like to admit. It hurt. I didn't think it would ever get better. I didn't think I'd ever be able to feel that way again. I hid behind my pessimism for a few years. I bought into the narrative that Sonic's best days were in the past. I don't regret who I needed to be, but if Heroes broke my faith, Rush was the game that started to restore it. I was absolutely right about one thing. I had outgrown Sonic. I could never again be Sonic's primary demographic. Because the truth is, Sonic has always been for kids first and foremost, and it was perhaps inevitable that I'd feel alienated for a while when I got old enough to notice that. I'd taken that so personally that I'd almost let that resentment cause me to miss out on something special. But when I came back to the series, I knew no other game could ever let me down like that again. And I did my best to approach each new game with hope that it would be what I wanted, but also with the expectation that even if it wasn't, I'd still probably be able to find something to like about it. This positive attitude would occasionally lead me to make some extremely silly declarations, as I would often end up going against the grain. But on the other hand, I can show you my own words from here on out. And I'd rather have a bunch of over-enthusiastic memories than a decade and a half of being miserable anyway. That willingness to at least try to look for what's good about a game is also what's enabled me to have so many more good times with this series than I otherwise could have. And isn't having fun with games the point? Maybe Sonic wouldn't always be exactly what it was when I was a kid. Maybe it wouldn't always live up to my expectations, maybe it would keep having ups and downs and all-arounds, maybe I'd still be let down sometimes, and maybe things would change and keep changing. But growing up didn't mean I couldn't still enjoy the series, and it didn't mean I had to stop caring. I don't think I ever told him this, so I will now. Thank you, Morgan, for making me play Sonic Rush. You showed me a better future that I didn't want to see, and with the benefit of hindsight, it really was a portent of things to come. What Nishiyama and his team at Dimps made was a game that would take modern Sonic, not just the character, but the game design philosophy, to the next level. A game that would redefine Sonic's edge, aura, and tone with a style all its own. A game that, I'd discover as I trepidatiously let myself back into the fandom, had people begging and pleading for the main console titles to be more like this. And whether Sega was listening, or circumstances demanded it, they would soon get their wish. Sonic Rush would be that rare handheld spin-off that sees its influence spill back over into the main series. Less than a year later, Yuji Naka, the last remnant of the original group that created Sonic the Hedgehog, would leave Sega, and Akinori Nishiyama would find himself as the new head of Sonic Team. There's plenty more where that came from. The next episode of this season, a nearly hour-long episode on Sonic and the Secret Rings, how did I do that, is available right now for $5 and up backers of my Patreon. And of course, the complete season will come out here on YouTube once it's all finished. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Two Dudes Gaming in Elizabethton, Tennessee for letting me borrow that OGDS. Check them out if you're in the area. They are far and away my favorite retro store. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, and until next time, you keep geeking, I'll keep critiquing.